you've made multiple career transitions when you've come to these kind of crossroads decisions. And there was one thing that you said in your book when you were making the transition from federal prosecutor to the circuit solicitor. You're deciding whether or not to run. And for some context for those listening or watching this, it was an all odds stacked against you type of an election where it was against an entrenched incumbent who had been elected several times, just switched to being a Republican from being a Democrat, had support from both sides of the aisle, had never lost an election, and you're just this new up and comer that's coming up. You can't start running with your current job as a federal prosecutor because there's a conflict of interest there. So you'd have to quit that without knowing whether or not you were actually going to win the election when all the odds said that you were going to lose the election. And then to top it all off, you're at a wedding and this person comes up to you who's the opposition, who is with the opposition anyway, one of the leaders of the campaign, and basically starts talking crap at this wedding and saying like, hey, we like you. You're probably good for some other positions later on, but this is not the one. You should probably give up on this. And you said ultimately the pro of purpose and meaning outweighed all of the arguments for security, predictability, and familiarity. So the question that I have for you is, do you think for all people that purpose and meaning should outweigh most other values in the value hierarchy, even if they are prudent values like security and predictability, or is it a situational thing?
I think you have to know yourself. And if you're super, super risk averse, then quitting your job to run against an entrenched incumbent is hard. It's hard. And as I write in the book, I was going to drop out after that. After my friend said, who's now a friend, we ran a poll, you're losing 80-20. Even after all the consequences of that decision, I'd already left a job. I mean, I didn't want to fail.
Yeah.
So I know myself, and I have a mortal fear of failure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't care if you say I was successful. That doesn't like motivate me. What I don't want you to say is he was a failure.
Yeah.
So here I was going to fail in a spectacular way in front of my hometown. And I needed a voice in my life to talk some sense into me, which we all need. So there have been other times when I could have done something, or, there were other opportunities I could have run for things when I was in politics. I mean, you can run for governor, you can run for Speaker of the House. There was an opening while I was there, and one of my very close friends was going to get it, and he didn't get it. We literally had to talk Paul Ryan into it. He didn't want to do it. You have to know yourself. So I'm really big in this book. I do get it's wrong to lie to people, but I get why we do it. We want people to think that we're smarter than we are, or faster, or way less, or whatever. I get it. I do not get lying to ourselves. I don't. So at this point, security probably, once you can check that box, once you can say, look, I'm not going to starve to death. My wife's not going to starve to death. My kids are not going to starve to death. You check that box, it liberates you. But if you can't check that box, then, and it's my paradigm is, what's the worst thing that can happen? That's the way I make decisions. So if the worst thing that can happen is I cannot meet the needs and responsibilities I've agreed to meet, then I probably should not do it. But if the worst thing that can happen is I maybe get embarrassed because I come up on the short end of a vote,
and then you get a job at a private law firm that pays handsomely as your failure,
and I don't have to run again, and I'm probably wealthier because it pays a lot better than being in public service. I had an old Sunday school teacher who used to tell me not to go through life saying what I wish I had done. And I had that voice. I used to walk on the golf course, not playing, but I live right beside it, walking, making up my mind whether or not to leave a job that I really liked to run for district attorney. And it was a hard decision. And I'd always say, you know what, I can't beat him. I shouldn't do it. And I would hear his voice saying, do not go through life saying what you wish you had done.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be sitting at the nursing home, telling nurses war stories, boring them to death about the time I almost ran for office.
Yep. That perspective is what's driven me in a lot of the bigger decisions that I've made is the rocking chair test. If you're on your rocking chair at 95 years old and you're coming down to the last, couple years, will I regret not having given this a shot? And it's because I fear that so much more than failing at that thing, because there's nothing I can do about it at that point. And at that point, all the people who would have laughed at me or mocked me or talked about me behind my back or whatever, they were gone out of my life 40 years ago. So why am I going to make the decision because of them when I'm the one that's going to sit in the rocking chair and reflect on my life? And it's only going to be the people closest to me that it affects.
You raise an amazing point there. Who are the voices that we let speak into our lives? I mean, social media, it's so much worse for my kids' generation than it was, maybe somebody scratches something on a bathroom wall at my high school.
Right.
But it's so much worse now. All these voices like defining success or setting expectations for our lives, even people that don't know us. I pick your advisors carefully, but also be really, really careful who you let speak into that definition. You used the word fail when you were on the rocking chair, that you fail. And I would say, Travis, you get to define what is failure. I mean, Jesus Christ lost a vote to a guy named Barabbas. He lost. I mean, the crowd had a choice. You can pick Jesus or you can pick a notorious murderer. And they picked Barabbas.
Yeah, and the stakes were pretty high for that choice.
Yeah, he wound up dying. So but he didn't fail. So losing and failing to me are two different things. And I would argue failing is not venturing. It is not trying.
Yeah. Yeah, you said that in your book when you said that was kind of the last kind of exclamation point on that whole section was basically like, even if I lost, it would have still been a win for me, because a real loss would have been never trying.
Yeah.
There's a lyric from a song that I wrote on my phone. I had it saved with a picture of my son when he was first born that said, "My only failure in life is never having tried," or something like that. Or the biggest failure in life is never trying. And it just kind of stuck with me to this day. And I really liked how you put that in your book. And so I wanted to ask one question on that as well, because there's one part where you said there's a big desire to make pain end. And because you were remarking how insane it was for you to have put months and months of thought into this decision to run. And then how this 3-minute conversation with your opposition was enough to make you go, you know what, he's right, I should stop. And it was minutes later where you had come to that conclusion. And how crazy it is in retrospect when you're looking back on it to be like, what was I thinking of? Like, what? Yeah. I was that, whatever, weak or scared or fearful that I was willing to quit after I just spent 9 months coming up with this decision, and I felt good about it. And I looked at the worst case scenario. It turns out it wasn't that bad. Like I already did all of this work, and then this one person says one thing one time, and it just makes me go, we'll quit. We'll throw in the towel. But you said that there's this massive desire to make pain end. And then the desire to avoid pain before it comes is also just as big. And I thought that was just a really succinct way to put that, because it does sound like anybody listening to this would be like, oh, that's funny that we should, scoff at that or whatever. But everybody listening to this has also made that exact same decision where you put all this time and effort and you do this thing. And the first sign of potential failure, or maybe failure just becoming more of a reality than you originally thought, and you're done, you're giving up. So the question that I want to ask you is more related to the opposite side of that, because I do think that there's also this sunk cost fallacy that you have to take in consideration, where sometimes you continue doing something because you've put 9 months of work into it, or 3 years of work into it, or 18 whatever years of work into it, when it is actually healthy to let it go. So my question is more like, how do you reconcile the polarity of those two things when this is the right thing, but you're letting other people get in your head and you should keep doing it, versus like, well, I've been doing this for 12 years, so it would be dumb to quit now, even though I don't feel like this is the right move for me. How do you deal with those?
It is so hard, Travis, to balance intuition and emotion, which would include pain and logic. And I cannot imagine trying and trying and trying to do something. I mean, think about a, a woman or a man that has been struggling on all these mini tours, and they're a stroke away, or they're two strokes away from qualifying, and they want to get their tour card, and all of the sacrifices, their family, and they're living in hotels, and they just can't let it go. I mean, Tom Brady, speaking of can't let it go, I mean, you could argue he came back for one too many years. Logic and knowing what you want that final like scene to look like. I mean, how much of your life, we got one shot at this, one crack at it. How much of your life do you want to spend trying to get something that has proven to be elusive?
Hmm.
And if it's proven to be elusive for a decade, I would say the odds are it's going to be elusive for 11 years and 12 years. So what I would do is I would figure out, why has it proven to be elusive? The why is what I want to know. Is it because you didn't have the capital? The people that know about your product love it, but you don't have the capital. Okay, that's one thing. Is it this technology's caught up with you and it's just not there anymore? It's like a fax machine. People just don't use them anymore. So I'm big on logic. I mean, I don't like pain, but the logic, I think, is what ought to drive our decisions. I don't mean to exclude joy and happiness and all that. Let it pick the music. You like music, I like music. Let it pick the music for your life. But logic has got to set the course, or you're probably not going to like where you're going.